let's get the read on all of this and what we could be looking at with Speakerman Media President Lee Speakerman, Stanford School of Business lecturer Dave Dodson. Dave, to you first then. What is your take on the importance of whether the president got it wrong or not when it came to the Chinese making a call? The talks are still on for September, so should we just leave it at that?
I actually think it's a pretty big deal, Neil, because if we can't even agree on whether a phone call took place, how are we possibly going to get a trade negotiation or a trade agreement together? Think about the things. On Friday, the president of China is an enemy. On Monday, he's a great leader. On Tuesday, we're arguing about whether a phone call was being made or not. We are so far away from having a trade agreement. And this is from the person who's the master of deal making. Now, look, we made two catastrophic errors. I'm all in favor of trying to level the playing field and making sure that China's unfair trade practices are put to rest. But we made two catastrophic errors. The first one is we decided to fight a trade war with everybody all at once, instead of pulling the rest of the countries together and fight a united front against China, because our beef with China is the same beef that other countries have. The second thing is this erratic behavior with the business community. You know, at one level you could say it's annoying, it's frustrating, we'll get through it. Once we have a trade agreement, everything will be fine. That's not the real problem, I think, Neil. The real problem I see is this, is that Donald Trump is on the verge of losing the support of the business community. Not Wall Street, not the investment world, but the guy who is the supply chain manager at John Deere or at Home Depot, who has to make decisions. This is getting very frustrating for the business environment because they don't know whether the China is an enemy or a great leader or not. And once he loses the support of business, China can wait us out because they know they can make it to November 2020.
Now, Lee, you're a different point of view here, but I did want to ask you whether the president risks jumping the shark on this, trying to re-exercise the Emergency Powers Act, I believe during the Carter years of 1977, that would block companies' actions, in this case, dealing with China. That is where, to the professor's point, the president might have alienated his base of business interests who like pretty much everything else he's done when it comes to tax cuts, regulatory relief, that he could be killing that relationship with just that proposal. What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, President Trump's real base are working people, the workers in those states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that had been voting Democratic, voted for Barack Obama. That is his base, not Wall Street and these other businesses. American business is very important, but I disagree with Dave. The issue is not just China. We have a $70 billion goods trade deficit with Japan, Germany, and Mexico. 60 to 70 billion, actually even more with Mexico. So, you know, we can't just unite against China. Now, China is the worst.
Well,
we
it's
have
a good thing because he's fighting with
everyone,
Lee, right? He's fighting with everybody, and that's the problem.
Because
Wouldn't you want to pick and choose your battles?
The world is upside down, and President Trump is correct when he said we've been the world's piggy bank. We cannot afford, the paradigm for trade is terrible for America, hosing American workers from almost every country in the world, unfortunately. So the way to simplify it, I do agree with Dave on this. We do need to make it clear what our plan is and where we're going. Let's announce that we're going to have a 15% uniform tariff on all imported goods from all countries.
Let's stick to reality right now. And what we're dealing with right now. And
that is reality. It could be reality.
Yeah, but it's not right now. So, Professor, I'm looking at. I'm telling you, it's not happening right now. So, Professor, what I'd like to ask you is this: the president, the president is saying right now, Professor, that right now Xi Jinping is a brilliant man. Last week he was sort of like on our enemies list, along with the chairman of the Federal Reserve. I'm just wondering whether he is imperiling his own chances of success by blowing up his own progress.
I think he is. Lee, you mentioned states like Wisconsin and Ohio. You got to get out there and visit them because those soybean farmers are getting slaughtered. And it's not just temporary, because what's happening as a result of this trade war, which is being mishandled, is that, for example, for soybean capacity is being expanded in Russia and Kazakhstan and Brazil. And that capacity is not going to go away. Those farmers are going to get decimated. And you're right, Lee, that is Donald Trump's base. And he's going right after them and he's hurting them permanently. In terms of how he's handling this trade trade war. What he needs to be doing is he needs to be sending a very clear signal to business that this is the progression that we're going to take, and we're going to escalate it if certain things don't happen. But the erratic behavior is what's been so frustrating for business. And that's what we have to address. And in terms of the 15% across the board tariff, look, I agree, of course, that jobs have been lost in the United States, but we have this bad habit. We've had this bad habit. We've had this bad habit for almost a generation of blaming our problems on everybody else. The fact is, it's not everybody else's problem that we have an opioid crisis that has reduced mortality. It's not everyone else's fault that our education system has crumbled. We call it the Rust Belt for a reason. And you go to China and you look at the area above Hong Kong, in the Shanghai region, where they've invested in infrastructure. Those are the kinds of things that make you productive. We cannot tariff our way back to being productive. We have to look inward,
Dave, but
and we have to fix our own problems.
Go ahead, Lee.
Dave, it is our own problem. Dave, this began in the 1980s, early 80s and late 70s, when we allowed Japan to dump steel in the U.S. That began the massive deindustrialization of the American heartland. And then China took the book from Japan and put it on steroids. And they have been dumping goods into this country. Yes, we can tariff our way back to a level playing field because tariffs are what enabled us to build our mighty industrial economy for most of our history. Our founding fathers, Abraham Lincoln, all believe strongly in tariffs.
But Lee,
it was Republican Party orthodoxy well into the 20th century.
For that. Lee, you're very consistent on that. Do you worry that the president is
and
all
it's
over?
Simple.
Lee, yeah, it might be, but I'm just telling you, the president's all over the map. I know every time you come on what you're going to say. I admire that. I'm telling you, the president's all over the map on this, and I don't think he knows what he believes.
Lee, I would say this to you. First of all, the problem with doing across-the-board tariffs is, what are you going to tell your natural gas industry in Texas when they can't export because they're not competitive? What are you going to tell the farmers in Iowa or Wisconsin?
Dave, we have
or
an
Ohio
$800 billion goods trade deficit.
Lee, let me finish. There are sectors of the economy that would be seriously hurt by this across-the-board tariff. The second thing is that if you do an across-the-board, let me finish. If you do an across-the-board tariff, what you're basically saying is, look, we can just tweet our way into productivity, and the rest of the countries will respond, and they will respond in kind. And this sort of static analysis that we do a tariff, and then all of a sudden the whole world is going to come to their knees and surrender to us, is not how the real world works. And if you want evidence of that, look at what we've done for the last 2 years. We went to China and we tweeted some tariffs and expected they were going to come to their knees, and they have responded, as has the rest of the world. And that sort of dynamic process is what happens in trade negotiations. Lee, I appreciate that maybe around Lincoln's time this would have worked, but today the world's way more complex.
Well, I covered it during Lincoln's time, and it didn't work.